Over the years I became very fond of smoking cigarettes mainly because they can't kill me anymore and I also don't get addicted to them thanks to my Saitama genes and powers. So after I cleaned the old garage where I'm supposed to meet Art the Clown, I went outside for a smoke break, and that's when I started thinking about my past with the Winchester family, and I helped them all as a hunter. And then I heard a familiar voice. It was Dawn, and I secretly thought, so it's that time already. And I heard her shouting, "Hi handsome, could you please let my friend use your bathroom? I'm sure she could make it worth your while." And then I smiled warmly and I said, "Thank you gorgeous, but you should both come inside because this is a bad neighborhood, there's crazy people around here." And I said, "Don't worry, I'm not a bad guy, you will be safer in here with me." And then Dawn smiled and looked at Vicky Hayes and she said, "I'm going in there with that handsome muscular man, and you will too if you know what's good for you." And then Vicky Hayes said, "I'll race you." And I heard everything they said, and then they got out of the car and ran up to me very fast, and then I let them inside and they were both surprised to find out how clean it was. And I even made comfortable furniture and a big king-size bed, and I even made a big shower room. And earlier that day I also ordered a lot of pizza because I knew Art the Clown was going to kill the pizza staff that day, so they saw everything inside and they asked me, "Do you live here?" And then I said, "As a matter of fact I don't, but a famous Hollywood actress by the name of Kate Beckinsale will be living here soon. She hired me to clean up the place and exterminate any rodents or pests I find here." And then I said, "This place was very nasty, but I fixed it up real nice and it took me 2 days to do it, and now it looks like a beautiful penthouse apartment." And then Dawn smiled big and she said, "Let's go over there handsome," and she pointed to the bed, and I actually designed doors and windows that Art the Clown wouldn't be breaking into any time soon. So while he was stuck outside I had a lot fun with Vicky Hayes and Dawn, and right now I was screwing Victoria Hayes in the butthole, and then I came inside her butthole and she had another massive orgasm, and then Dawn licked up all my cum out of her butthole, and I started screwing Dawn's mouth like a vagina, and she was moaning very loudly and squeaking like the sex pot I always knew she was. And I screwed Dawn so hard that her mind went numb and she squirted on all of Kate's bed sheets and blankets, and I had sex with them both so long and I came inside them both so much that they both became dead tired. And that's when I started having sex with the famous cat lady from the movie, but her real name is Denise. So it all went from being a horror movie to a full-blown porno because Art the Clown got stuck outside because he's an idiot that only had one function, and that's killing people very effectively while also torturing them and making them suffer in the worst ways possible. But this time, instead of all that, they got to have sex with me for so many hours that they all fell deeply in love with me, and I also got all of them pregnant. And Dawn is a little sex nympho, so I ended up having sex with her a lot more, and then I had sex with them all one last time before I finally decided to step outside, where I knew Art the Clown was waiting for me, and he was now very angry. And I said, "Hello Art, I know you can't speak, so I'm going to tell you this just once. Go crawl back into whatever hellhole you came out of and I won't kill you today." And then he looked at me and he smiled, and I said, "You better just leave if you want to live to see another day, you dumbass clown." And then he went inside his black trash bag and I said, "Don't I know who and what you are, so don't do it." And he paused for a second and looked at me with surprise, and then he pulled out his gun, and it was a 44 Magnum like the big ones they once used during the Frontier era, and those actually have the powers to kill celestial beings because they weren't made by ordinary humans, they were made by demons and angels. And then I smiled and said, "So it's like that?" And then Art the Clown smiled like the perverted being that he is, and I laughed when he fired his gun, and then I caught the bullet and I flicked it back at him, and it destroyed him on a cellular level, and I knew it wouldn't kill him because the pale girl gave him true immortality. He can always come back. And I said, "See you soon, you sick bastard." And then I took his little gun for myself and I said, "This is mine now and you shouldn't play with guns, little boy." And then I took the very special Magnum because I knew it was a god killer that could transform any human ammunition into god-killing weapons. The powers of this legendary gun can punch through the planet without harming the earth and hit someone on the other side of the world.